Our modern day-to-day lives are made of countless interactions with the objects we encounter. From the tiniest particles to the biggest structures. Join us as we explore the inside workings of the world around us. This is Inside Things.
Seasons: winter, spring, summer, and autumn are the world's 4 seasons. How we experience the seasons is dependent on where we're located on Earth. Regions near the equator experience fairly the same weather throughout the year, with seasons barely distinguishable. But for areas to the north and south, the season changes are more significant. Each season has its own beauty, unique characteristics, and dangers. In spring, the weather is warmer and often wetter. Harvests begin to grow, animals awaken from hibernation. In the summer, temperatures may increase to the hottest of the year. This may cause heat waves and drought, which can cause trouble for all living things. Rainfall may increase as well. In autumn or fall, temperatures are cool again. Animals prepare for even colder weather, migrating to warmer regions or storing food. Plants may become dormant. In winter, some regions may have snow, ice, or cold rain. Now, we experience the cycle of seasons every year because of the Earth's tilted axis towards the sun. Depending on which time of the year, the Earth's northern or southern axis leans closer to the sun. The hemisphere tilted towards the sun experiences summer, while the other hemisphere tilted away from the sun experiences winter. Meanwhile, at the other areas of the Earth, the axis isn't tilted towards the sun but parallel to it. In these regions, the hemisphere experiences spring and autumn. Therefore, the seasons we experience are dependent on the specific points in the Earth's journey around the sun. There's the summer and winter solstice, which are the longest and shortest days of the year. This happens when the Earth's axis is either closest or farthest from the sun. Summer solstice in the northern hemisphere happens around July 21, at the same day as winter solstice in the south. Meanwhile, summer solstice in the southern hemisphere occurs around December 21, at the same day as the winter solstice in the north. Equinoxes happen when the Earth's axis is pointed parallel to the sun, instead of tilted towards or away from it. This is when day and night will be experienced equally. Spring, or vernal equinox, in the northern hemisphere happens at around March 20, at the same day as the autumnal equinox in the south. Meanwhile, the spring equinox in the northern hemisphere occurs at around September 20, at the same day as the autumnal equinox in the north.
Trumpets. Basically, a trumpet is an amplifier or an acoustic megaphone. The sound that gets amplified, which is what we hear, comes from the buzzing sound of the lips, created when the musician blows into the trumpet. How should a musician blow into the trumpet? First, he firms the muscles of his lips. Then, he blows air out past his lips at a high enough speed and pressure to make the lips buzz. Now, this buzz has a pitch, which can be modified by the player, either by tightening or loosening his lips. It is in this way that the lips are similar to vocal cords and are singing. The lip buzz is therefore the most important factor in the trumpet's sound. Also, part of the resonance of this lip buzz comes from the musician's oral cavity, which is amplified by the instrument. When he buzzes into the trumpet, it forms a tone. Pretty simple, isn't it? But here's the part where it gets a bit complicated. The pitch is determined by the musician's buzzing lips, but also by the overtone series. But what is the overtone series? It is an acoustic science term, which states that any vibrating object vibrates at a series of sympathetic harmonies. Now with the trumpet. This means that there are several spaced out pitches that lock into place while the musician plays it, called partials. For the musicians, these are like little shelves or notches where the muscles feel the most comfortable vibration because the vibrations of the lips are locking into place with the acoustics of the horn. Early trumpets had a little more than an extremely long cone shape, which produced a different set of partials depending on its particular shape. For example, for an entire chromatic scale to be covered, musicians will need several trumpets of different lengths. And because of its inconvenience, the modern trumpet was soon developed to accommodate the complete chromatics. How? First, the long cones were shortened by wrapping the tubing around itself. Next came the tubing of the valves, which was invented so that more tubing can be added to the instrument, in order to allow air to move through more or less tubing, depending on the buttons pushed by the musician. So pushing down the valves means making the trumpet shorter or longer, essentially. That's the basic workings of a trumpet.
Crying. Crying makes people feel better, can reduce stress, and keep the body healthy. Much has been said about crying and its healing properties. Research suggests that crying makes 9 out of 10 people feel better. It improves the mood of 88.8% weepers and only 8.4% feeling worse. In a year, women cry for an average of 4 to 7 times, and only 7 times for men. Did you know 20% of crying lasts longer than 30 minutes? 8% go on longer than an hour. 39% of crying happens in the evening, 6 to 8 p.m. being the most common time. 77% of crying happens at home, 15% in the car or while at work, and 40% when one is alone. What happens when one cries? There are 3 types of tears produced by the lacrimal gland, which is above the eye. The continuous or bustle tears are produced to keep the eye surface permanently moist and protected. Its makeup consists of water, lipids, or fats, and proteins. It also contains compounds that gives protection against infection. Each blink produces this type of tears. The next type are reflex tears. It is fluid that forms into a protective film over the eyes to keep it from irritants and other foreign bodies. Finally, there are emotional tears, which consist of an entirely different makeup. It includes higher concentration of content, instrumental to maintain balance in our body and well-being. Such tears are produced in stress-induced danger or arousal. Why cry? Emotional tears contain high levels of proteins, manganese, potassium, the hormone prolactin, and enkephalin, an endorphin and a natural painkiller. Manganese is an essential nutrient that helps lower cholesterol levels and fights skin problems. Potassium is involved in muscle control and blood pressure. Prolactin, a hormone more present in women than men, is related to stress management and the immune system. That's why emotional tears is believed to bring the body back in balance after a negative experience. Crying can actually be considered a means of survival, because any unalleviated negative emotions may cause health problems, such as heart attack or brain damage. matches. With the invention of the match in 1827, we were able to build fires in a snap. But how can such a little stick conjure up a fire so conveniently? What makes a fire? For fires to persist, it needs to contain an igniter, a fuel, and an oxidizer. In matches, these are all present via the red phosphorus, sulfur, and potassium chloride. Aside from these, a match also contains ammonium phosphate, which stifles the afterglow of the match when the flame dies. The matchstick is also bathed in hot paraffin wax, which ensures that the flame burns down past the head to the stick. The head also contains animal glue to bind the materials together and serve as extra fuel. The head also has powdered glass inside to provide friction that aids striking and binds materials and creates an even burn. Now, when it comes to igniting the match, it's phosphorus that does the most part. However, phosphorus is known for being unstable, sensitive, and volatile. In fact, white phosphorus, which was used in early matches, can actually ignite spontaneously in the air. Modern matches use another form of the same element, called the red phosphorus. While on its own, phosphorus can light up, but creating a flame needs something to burn, and more oxygen than it can get from the air. Sulfur acts as its fuel, and the potassium chlorate as its oxidizing agent. Phosphorus generates heat to break down potassium chlorate, which in the process releases oxygen. Combined with sulfur, the oxygen allows the flame to thrive long enough for us to light up a candle or barbecue. This is what makes the Strike Anywhere match. For matches contained in boxes, you'll find the phosphorus contained in separate strips on the sides, where you're supposed to strike the match head. And did you know the match head isn't actually a natural red head? Red dye was simply added to the tip of the matchstick for visual purposes. Popcorn. What is popcorn? Popcorn is a cereal grain that originates from a wild grass. It is the only type of corn that pops. Popcorn is made up of three main components: the endosperm, the germ, and the pericarp. The endosperm is made up of soft and hard starch granules. It is a carbohydrate and is white or yellow in color. Meanwhile, the starch provides energy for the living part of the kernel, which is called the germ or the embryo. And lastly, the outer hull of the kernel is called the pericarp, which is made of cellulose. Popcorn needs heat to pop. Popcorns pop when the kernel's internal temperature has reached 400 to 460 degrees Fahrenheit or 204.4 to 237.8 degrees Celsius. Bound within the endosperm or the starch is moisture. This is what turns to steam when the kernel is heated. And because the pericarp or the hull is hard and flinty, pressure builds up within the kernel. The starch inside the kernel then becomes soft like gelatin. The moisture will continue to vaporize until the pressure inside the kernel reaches 135 pounds per square inch or 61.24 kilograms per square meter. At this point, pericarp ruptures, and the gelatinized starch granules puff out. The kernel literally turns inside out. The endosperm becomes the white part of the popped kernel you see, while the pericarp becomes the darker, flaky bit at the center of the kernel. We often eat popcorn as a nutritious snack. It's become a favorite snack by consumers of all ages. Americans consume more than 16 billion quarts of popcorn per year, which approximates to 51 quarts per man, woman, and child. Popcorn can also be enjoyed with salt or other flavors, but it is most popular because of its nutritional value. 1 cup of air-popped popcorn contains 31 calories, 1 gram of protein, 6 grams of carbohydrate, 1 gram of fiber, and just a trace of fat. Germs. Did you know we catch the most common illnesses spread from the swimming pool, animals, the air we breathe, the food we eat, and even the surfaces we touch? This movement of germs is called the chain of infection. This involves the agent, which may be a bacteria, fungi, virus, or parasite, and is found at some source. This reservoir can be a person, animal, or plant that's already host to the germ. The reservoir can also be a body of water, food, or even an inanimate object that transfers the agent to a new host. This is how the germ can multiply in a new host organism and continue to spread. The most common way of germ infection is through person to person. The germs we usually catch from other people include the common cold or flu, chickenpox, and strep throat. Infection can be made from direct contact, airborne transmission, or indirect contact from surfaces. In direct contact, germs is passed on from one person to another. Transmission can be made by touching another person, such as in a handshake. Meanwhile, indirect contact needs an intermediate object such as a doorknob. When an infected person touches the doorknob, germs are left behind. Then the next person who follows can pick up the germs left on the doorknob. Free-living germs like bacteria and fungi can survive on inanimate objects longer than viruses. Moisture aids in germ survival. Airborne transmission can come from environmental sources. For instance, fungi in the soil can release germs that can be moved by the wind and be inhaled by people. Exposure to this can result in skin and lung infections or flu-like symptoms. Windy conditions or disturbance of the soil during construction can increase this mode of transmission. Other methods include droplet transmission. Most respiratory infections and illnesses are often spread through droplets. Ingestion of a contaminated food or water is another cause. For example, E. coli is a bacterium present in many foods. And when not cooked well or prepared properly, it can cause food poisoning to its consumer. Bodies of water, which may be contaminated with germs from animal or human waste and sewage, may also cause a variety of symptoms such as gastrointestinal, skin, ear, respiratory, eye, and wound infections. Vending machines. Ever wonder how the convenient vending machines work? The vending machine is in fact an invention that works behind a simple concept, but with a complexity to its inner workings. Here's a closer step-by-step look into how they work. First is the keypad. This is where you enter the code for the specific product you want to buy. Once you've pressed the code, it will signal the central computer which product to dispense. When you pay with a bill, the note slides through an optical scanner. This takes a photo of the bill, which sends signals to the main computer. The machine then checks the bill's details to determine its value or amount equivalent and to see whether or not it is an authentic bill. When you pay with coins, the machine recognizes its value based on its size, thickness, and diameter. The details are very specific to each amount of coin, for the machine to easily tell how much money was put in it. Now, once the money has been put into the machine, the central computer will check if the amount corresponds with the product code you've entered. If the money put inside isn't enough, the machine will ask you to put in more. If the money is more than the product's worth, change will be refunded in a slot below. In older vending machines, a motor is electronically activated to spin a metal coil that holds the product. Then this metal coil pushes the product forward, falling into the bin with a slot where you can reach into and get your product. Meanwhile, with newer vending machines, often used with beverage, a motorized arm is used. Here, the arm stretches across the width of the machine and will move to the correct shelf to get the drink. Then, the drink will be pushed into it. The arm will be lowered and pushed to the dispensing slot for you to get your drink. There you have it. Another episode down the drain. Still, there are countless more things to explore. Join us next time as we look and know more about the world around us. See you next time on Inside Things.